Welcome to Dark Truths. Religion Uncovered, a space where we explore the complexities of faith. Tonight we're diving into a subtle but powerful shift in religious life. The moment belief stopped being about personal discernment and became about an act of delegation. In the ancient world, faith wasn't passive. It was a vigilant practice of self-awareness and scrutiny. The prophets faced rigorous tests. Visions weren't just accepted, they were questioned. Every voice claiming divine authority was held under a microscope. The scriptures themselves warned us, "Do not believe every spirit," showing us that the ancients understood the real danger wasn't disbelief, but misplaced trust. Fast forward to today, and that principle is often reversed. In our rush for clarity, we outsourced our authority. We follow voices that sounds confident, charismatic, or just popular, giving up our own discernment for a sense of certainty. Religious figures like priests, pastors, and online influencers became filters for the divine. Faith became less of a personal encounter and more of a mediated experience. Ancient theology would call this a spiritual negligence. Believers were constantly warned against blind trust in kings and unexamined acceptance of prophets. False prophets weren't just immoral. They were distinguished by their absolute certainty, their refusal to tremble before the weight of their claims. True prophets, on the other hand, approached their role with a deep fear of misrepresenting God. Today we often reward the opposite. Confidence is mistaken for divine anointing, and unwavering certainty is confused with truth. In our current landscapes, platforms and notoriety often stands in for genuine discernment. The louder the voice, the more authoritative it seems. But Scriptures tells a different story. God often speaks in subtlety, not through the loudest channels. Think of Elisha, who found God not in the fire or the earthquake, but in a delicate whisper. Consideramos a humble shepherd, not an established priest. Or Jeremiah, whose youthful reluctance stands in stark contrast to prophetic bravado. Even Jesus was a carpenter, disregarded by the religious elite of his day. These examples highlight a consistent theme. Divine truth often arrives uncredentialed, challenging the status quo. Modern religion struggles with this because true discernment is a slow and uncomfortable process. It destabilizes our neat belief systems. Delegation, on the other hand, offers an illusion of security without the need for personal risk. But this reliance on delegated beliefs makes us vulnerable, not to doubt, but to manipulation. When we surrender our personal discernment, faith itself becomes fragile and easily weaponized. History is a relentless witness to this. Entire movements have been led astray by charismatic leaders claiming a divine endorsement. Communities have rationalized violence, exclusion, and abuse, all justified by blind trust in authority figures who were never tested. Ancient theologians knew these dangers. That's why prophets often walked alone. Visions were scarce and silence was respected. God didn't flood humanity with a cacophony of voices. He compelled us to listen intently and thoughtfully. In contrast, modern belief seems drawn to an abundance of voices. Opinions multiply, interpretations splinter, and discernment withers under a barrage of noise. But discernment was never meant to be easy. It requires patience, humility, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. It calls for us to resist the temptation of simply being told what to believe. When belief becomes a product of delegation, accountability vanishes. We hear phrases like, "I was just told," "I trusted them," and "I didn't know." But ancient theology rejects these excuses. Each believer is responsible for what they choose to follow. Faith isn't blind obedience. It's a dynamic fidelity to a truth that is rarely loud but is always precise, deliberate, and patient. It doesn't demand allegiance. It invites earnest discernment. The truth we arrive at tonight is provocative. A faith that cannot question authority is a faith that cannot recognize the truth. A belief system that sidesteps the hard work of discernment is perpetually vulnerable to deception. The ancients understood this. Many modern adherents seem to have forgotten it. So as we close, we leave you with a pressing question, one that ancient theology would pose to modern faith without mercy. If you have never tested the voices you trusted, how would you ever know when God was no longer speaking through them? Thank you for joining us on Dark Truths, Religion Uncovered. We invite you to share your thoughts below. Does faith require authority, or is it rooted in a discernment that should never be surrendered? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives into the complexities of faith.